Well, a very, very happy Tuesday, and welcome to another episode of the TNC Sports Talk. My name is Justin. Today is Tuesday, November 11th of 2025, and on today's episode, we will be focusing our attention around the National Football League as we have a couple stories that we would like to really dial in and focus in on here on today's podcast. Before we get started, I want to just kind of go ahead and reflect, congratulate, and talk about that about John Cena, WWE wrestler who has about 3 events left on his career calendar tour date. Um, was at the TD Garden, excuse me, last night in Boston, Massachusetts, and he opened up the program in front of his home crowd. Well, Paul Levesque, Triple H, opened up the program, welcomed John Cena out, talked greatness about John Cena as who he is and as a person, as an athlete, and um, Dominic Mysterio interrupts the conversation, um, and this celebration of a career, and kind of sticks his nose into a business that he doesn't belong in, which led to Paul Levesque announcing and making a match between John Cena and Dominic Mysterio as predicted for the Intercontinental Championship. John Cena wins the title, and this makes him now a Grand Slam champion. And, look, I think, reflection has its own meaning. When we look back on John Cena, he doesn't need the Intercontinental Champion to define and create a portfolio for what a career he's done. He's already a Hall of Famer in anyone's books, first ballot. But it just kind of solidifies this um this person and the career that he's had. He's won the United States Championship, the World Tag Teams Championship, the WWE Championship. You know, I think it's rightfully so that if he was to win the IC title, he's done it. And I'll be interested to see how long this, pulls off. Does Dominic, uh, with Survivor Series just a few weeks away, does Dominic come back and make get his rematch at Survivor Series in San Diego and retain that title? I know that because we finally have gotten to this point, there's new speculations that we can very well see, uh, him carrying it on and losing it in his final match on December 13th. And one speculations I quickly saw right away was there is a particular athlete at towards maybe the end of his career also that has gone after the Intercontinental Champion the last year or two that has failed, and that title would have also given him the Grand Slam Championship, and that would be Sheamus. So, I think there's a couple of different ways that we can kind of go about this, but I think a huge question, a lot of scenarios, questions can lurk right now, and would be one, who is John Cena's final opponent? We learned back last night on Raw that Rusev and Sheamus will advance to the next round. um if and when John Cena drops the Intercontinental Championship with 3 dates left, I don't think it's going to be much longer. I don't think it's going to probably be a quick turnaround. And how does it all kind of unfold? Like I said, you could have a rematch with Dominic Mysterio in San Diego, where Dominic wins back the championship. You could have You could even have John Cena versus Rey Mysterio. Then you could also have him drop it to his final opponent. And who could that opponent be? Sheamus is obviously a candidate. He's in the quarterfinals, but he's also someone who does not have that Grand Slam championship. And we've heard, listen, John Cena's made it, apparent that, look, he wants to help pave the future. What I struggle to find is, look, Dominic Mysterio can add on to his profile that he beat John Cena. So credited that Sheamus and John Cena's had matches, plenty of matches in the past. Okay. And I think it would technically make sense if Sheamus is the final opponent and becomes a Grand Slam champion. But what does that do for Sheamus's career? Because to me, Sheamus has already had a argumentative Hall of Fame career in my books. What it does for me, it kind of elevates Sheamus currently in the position he's at, as I consider him as a jobber, and he would be put back into a championship picture once again. But I also like the idea that if you don't use Sheamus as his final opponent, that John Cena could drop the title to Dominic Mysterio. I feel when you are looking for the younger generation talent in the WWE and you're wanting to give back to the company, I feel like you give more under Dominic's portfolio than you would to give a marker over Sheamus. Sheamus is still an active wrestler. I do not see a date on the calendar where Sheamus is up for retirement. This Sheamus could win the title at any time. But when you look at a person like Dominic Mysterio, who has, I think, just soared with the opportunities provided for him this year so far, you see the one of the several things Dominic does not have on his portfolio resume is that he doesn't have a victory over John Cena. At least not to my recollection. And so if you play it safe, you put the title back on Dominic at Survivor Series, John Cena will be there. He'll be in action. I don't think you need to put him in War Games. I mean, I don't think you need to do that. You put the title back on November 17th, next Monday, when he's, in one of his other stops. Have it short, it was short-lived. Maybe will be even forgotten, but still there. So congratulations, though, to John Cena. It is, I still think, a well-deserved accomplishment. You kind of are in these last, few months, are soaking in just every moment. You could see it. The fans were fantastic. A very livable moment. And if you weren't able to watch it, on television, if you weren't able to be there live, I think you have missed out. And that's the same thing that goes for his final matches, final appearances in this, end of career tour. So we'll just take a moment and appreciate that from John Cena. I want to also give a big shout out. Today is Veterans Day. I have friends and families that current and past time that are veterans, active military personnels, and more in my life. I, have taken appreciation to them and their wisdom, what they have gone through at any stage of being in an active service. I want to just give them a quick shout out. Guys like John Patowski, Steve Barber, so much more. um, how even my brother went through, um, military, the camp, made it through, was inactive for a while. Things happen, but the willingness, the sacrifice that you have to leave your friends, family, to fight for this wonderful nation in the country that we love and share the most here. So I want to just give a big shout out to them. Thank you for your services and what you have done for our country. Anyone out there celebrating Veterans Day, it is a memorial, a Remembrance Day for those veterans who have served and allowed us to live this life, that this freedom, have this freedom of life that we probably don't, we probably take for granted, to be honest. So, thank you to everyone out there. All right, so today we're focused in on the NFL. Week 11 has come and gone. We are well in the second half of the NFL season, which means holiday game. Holidays are coming up. Thanksgiving is right around the corner. In just about, what I say, 2-3 more weeks, we got the 3 games on Thanksgiving. We got Christmas games, and which means playoffs are right there. And, for some teams, they're already out of it. And I think we'll discuss about one of those teams here in this podcast. Another team, their hopes and dreams are probably out of it, but they're scraping the bottom of the barrel to find any living thing to keep them alive. And that would be the Cincinnati Bengals. While they just continue to struggle, they dropped a close game against the Chicago Bears this past Sunday, or not this past, a week ago. They had a bye week this past week, well deserved week. Um, and you kind of go into this back end. It is a do or die. You cannot lose a single game. You don't have any room for error. So their backs are up against the wall, and their first opponent is going to be against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Bengals beat the Steelers a couple weeks ago with Joe Flacco. It was a Thursday night game. I think a lot of people were impressed. This is the first game, that the Bengals won where Joe Burrow was not part of the season, part of the game at all. And so this is, we thought maybe this could have been a turning point in this season. Unfortunately, the following 2 games we fall short. That the in depth conversation of where we're at will probably come later on this week. What I want to focus in on, though, are some positives, because we are on the back end of this season. We're past the bye. We got week 11 through week 18 to finish off, and we have a chance still, as we're just 2 games back of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who hold a first place lead in the AFC North. With that being said, yesterday it was a pretty big day for the Bengals, as was ports, footage, photos, and everything came out as Joe Burrow returns to practice for the first time since his turf toe injury back in the middle of September. Remember, he left the second game of the season, maybe halfway through the first half, with a turf toe injury, as we saw Jake Browning. We saw Jake Browning replace him. The Bengals go on to finish and win the game, where they start the season off 0-2. But Joe required surgery in his foot, and for the first time has been on that practice squad out there with the Bengals starting yesterday. And it looks like the Bengals are taking advantage of that 21-day window with Burrow before he could be activated from the IR. Joe can practice without counting against the Bengals' 53-man roster. I think there's a lot of wisdom and intelligence that you can bring, that Joe Burrow brings to the table. I think it's given. It's a given trait, given talent. You don't see that in many ball players. So making sure that he's back on our field back in the sidelines with that, whether it's a headset, whether it's up in the box, or whether it's on the field. Just being in the game playing, calling, learning, hearing what's happening, giving his input into how this team could be better. Um, I feel like that is essential for this ball club. Any way he can contribute, and just his presence alone, I think, elevates this squad and hopefully gives a lot of motivation as they are fighting for a division championship, and if not, or a wild card spot. The clock is ticking though. So the Bengals are 1-6 with Joe since Joe's injury, despite a 38 point per game offense over the last 3 weeks. Defense has averaged 39 points per game since the injury. Joe Flacco, even though he's only started 4 games, we picked him up in a trade with the Cleveland Browns earlier this year. He's so far has held the fort down with a 65% completion comparison, with 11 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. I mean, if you have to say anything, I think Flacco had one of his better careers since leaving the Baltimore Ravens. So in hindsight, let's kind of break this open in a nutshell. Bengals, what do they have to deal with? Well, you have to beat the Steelers again. You got to play the Browns again. This time will be at Paycor Stadium. You still have 2 games against the Ravens. You got a game against the Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. And let's not forget about the Miami Dolphins in the mix. The work is cut out for you. After the win against the Steelers, I think we talked about this on a previous podcast, where the urgency is take advantage of the Jets, which we gave them their first win of the year. Take advantage of the Chicago Bears. And boy, didn't we have an opportunity, but our defense to fail us. Now, we also witnessed the end of the trade deadline last week. We also saw the dealt of Logan Wilson, defensive back for the Bengals, who went over to the Dallas Cowboys. In return, we got a draft pick. I was not happy with it. But all in all, our defense really needs to step up. And if you throw a defense like we have now, averaging 40 points a game, to the Baltimore Ravens, who have Lamar Jackson returning, so they feel like they're coming back to a completer team. You have the Steelers, who kind of have shown some cracks in their armor the last couple of weeks, but they are in a positive position. Like I said, the room for error is not existent. We cannot afford to get rid of any ball games. The good news out of it, we're 2-0 currently in the division. And so going into this game this Sunday, if we could beat the Steelers, beat the Ravens in a couple weeks, both games, and we can have ourselves the upper advantage if it came down to a tie. But this is how we perform over the next few weeks is also going to determine whether or not Joe Burrow will actually get a chance to get back on this field and play another game this season. Let's face it. I will take a healthy Joe Burrow any day of the week over a postseason opportunity, or just for sakes and purposes. I know that the Bengals, and I know that there are conversations that have looted here in recent hours and days, right? Joe Burrow has 21 days to get out there. That's 3 weeks. That takes you into December. And then depending where he's at, there's a chance, and depending where the Bengals are at and how he feels, there's a chance that he can return for the final 2 to 3 weeks of the season. First of all, first things first, I think that the Bengals need to focus on Joe Burrow's health. And if he is not even 100%, I don't care if even if he's 99, he's not 100% ready to go, do not throw him out there. This is our prized possession here. We need to take care of it. And if that costs us the rest of the year where we could head into the off year and improve our defense and do what we can to better ourselves for next season, then I'd take it. But if I want to see if Joe Burrow is 100%, and when I could see him back on the field this year, then we as a football team have to be in a contending statue to get him back. Contending statue. Now, right now, the division is up for grabs, and I think the division is where we want to be at. But that means you got to beat the Steelers again, which would put you at 4-6, and they will be back at 5-5. Then you got to find a way to beat the Steelers, find a way to beat the Ravens, not once but twice. And then now you would overcome the Steelers. You would hope that in the meantime, it's not the Steelers, excuse me. You'd have to beat the Steelers this weekend. They would become 5-5. We would become 4-6. So we're still a game back of the Steelers. And you would hope that their success is not so great for the remainder of the season. Then we'd have to go into a crunch time position and beat the Ravens, both home and away. That will put us ahead of the Ravens. And then we have to beat the Browns. We would be 6-0, and hopefully, if all else goes well, we'd be able to capture a division championship. But if we're nowhere near, okay, we get through the Ravens home and away game, and we're nowhere near. We're probably out of luck. We're probably at the bottom of the totem pole, on the outside looking in for a contender spot. I'd say let's just keep him out, maybe bring him back if he's ready for the final game of the season, just to show us that he's healthy, and then move on to next season and let that be that. But otherwise, there's still a lot of work to be done. And I know it's a positive news that he's back on the field. It's great to see him. It's great to see him move. Definitely despite the injuries that he's had. But it's also not a smart idea to put him out there when we don't have an offense that could block for him and a defense that is going to give up more points than we can score. But hopefully, whether you take it as positive, negative news, however you want to do it, we have Joe Burrow back on the football field once again. On the other side of the table, there are some teams out there, unfortunately, that are just on the outside looking to reset their ball clubs, make adjustments this coming up off season. And they're not looking to contend anymore. We learned yesterday that the Giants fired head coach Brain Duball in the middle of his fourth season, as they announced Mike Kafka replaces him as the intern head coach for the remainder of the year. Duball, 3.5 years with the Giants, 20, 40, and 1. And boy, I think this comes with this was rumored back from the owner, from John Myra, as he had probably attended to fire him back against the Broncos game week 7 after they were having an 18-point lead in the fourth. They're going to stick with Joe Shorian as the general manager as they find a new head coach. I think let's listen. The Giants. First of all, the fan base will tell you if you're a good team or not. Right? New York is notorious. Well, they'll make sure you know if they like your team or they don't, and if they like you or not. And so for the Giants, you're in a tough division. I tell you that. The NFC East is filled. Cowboys trying to stay relevant. The Commanders are trying to get back to the postseason, and the Eagles trying to have a repeat of a Super Bowl championship this year. And I don't think there's not a listen, college and pros are two different things. I understand you have a dynamic at the pro level. You just don't have that crystal ball saying, I see that this coach works out for this team. I think it sucks. Brian Duball, I think he, I don't know what's next for him if he gets another head coaching job, possibly. I wouldn't doubt it, wouldn't put it past him. But the Giants are now going to move on from him in hopes that they can kind of restart that clock. It's interesting because, what does this do to you? I think the ownership, okay, John has an opportunity to really think the rest of the year is, do we bring in another general manager and really reset the clock for other things? And, I say that, and I say that that is a huge decision because you got to ask yourself, is, Joe Shoyan a good manager, GM for the organization? So that would be the conversation, the question I'd ask in New York is, do you even take this one step further and fire your GM at the end of the season? And the reason why I say that is because it's the opportunity of resetting that clock. If you fire the head coach, you're going to have to find a new head coach, which they're going to bring in their own coaches, and more than likely you're going to have a new set of guys going after this Giants team. That's also going to come with the question of Jackson Dart and if he is still the future of the organization come next year. Jackson Dart has a 22%, a 62% completion rating with with 1,175 yards on the year with 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I think there's some coaching there. It's, do you have the right head coach? Do you have the right offensive coordinator to guide him along with the team to having some success in a very difficult division? So I was looking at it earlier last night. I was putting this together. I was looking at some of the possibilities of who could be the next head coach for the New York Giants. And I have a couple crazy ideas. I know they're always crazy. Jesse Minter, the Chargers defensive coordinator. Giants have invested a lot of defensive players over the years, and you look at a possibility of bringing a defensive coordinator in, focusing on getting that coordinator up and bringing in a good offensive coordinator. Washington's offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury, Lions OC Ben Johnson became a head coach. So why can't he? He's done wonders with Jaden Daniels. He was 28 to 37-1 from 19 to 22 with the Cardinals. And then he was 11-6 Why not? I like the idea. I think Jackson Dart needs maybe an offensive coordinator to kind of push him along. Clint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator of Seattle, he's turned the things right around in Seattle this year. I don't think many believed in Sam Donald in that team, but they're right now they're holding their fort down. Robert Saleh, defensive coordinator from the Niners, who used to be the head coach for the Jets in 21 to 24. Maybe bring him back and uh, bring on the other side of the conference. Steve Spagnolio, defensive coordinator for the Chiefs. He's already had two stints with the Giants. Chiefs turned things around and became and he's kind of arguably became the best defensive coordinator in the league. So, I think there's plenty of names out there. I think I'm going to throw out one name at the very end of this that I think is just absurd, but I could definitely see happen um here for the next 2 to 3 years. So the way I look at the Giants, this is a reset mechanism for me. Your question that I'm asking as an owner or as a GM, if you if Joe gets to keep his GM spot this offseason, bring in a new head coach, I feel like it's an all or nothing. It's a winner takes all. If this fails, you're gonna time to go, time to pack up and find something else. What does I got to say that this is a reset. You're not going to completely break down this team because you have nothing to really rebuild from what you already don't have. But you're trying to bring in another set of coaches that can, shed light and build from where they're at today. Obviously, in recent years, we've seen what the Giants cannot do under Brian Duball, and it's time to kind of, all right, maybe it's the coaching staff. Let's bring it in. Hey, it's always easy to point to the coaches, but when you bring in draft picks that can work, you're just not executing. Um, I think this is a way. So if the John Mara keeps Joe as the general manager, brings in a new head coach, you're going to kind of replace the offensive coordinator. You end up replacing some of the other coaches at the time. But the big question would be if you keep Jackson Dart. I think you would if I think you would keep Jackson Dart if you brought in a defensive coordinator. I'm just speculating here. I'm spitballing. I may be 100% wrong, but this is what I'm thinking. If you bring in a defensive coordinator head coach, you're keeping Jackson Dart. You're hiring an offensive coordinator that you trust to bring Jackson Dart up to the level, and that's it. If you are bringing in an offensive coordinator as the head coach, then you're going to restart and probably draft another quarterback, something that they would recommend and have a chance to get their hands on this offseason. You already have the record to kind of give yourself a higher draft pick this season. And I would argue that would be the case. Either way, you're not restarting from scratch, but you're reestablishing your front office and your coaching staff in desperate measures to help fix an organization that is not performing well. This isn't probably going to be the only team. I think Miami has a tough question that they have to answer. I think even Cincinnati at this point, depending on how the rest of the season looks, they need to make some changes this offseason. And I think, we could be the first to go anywhere with those changes would be a change, would be probably better for the organization. But we're going to start seeing a little bit more happen as the season comes to an end, as we linger around who's going to be contenders and postseason calibers compared to who's already out of it and looking for next season, next year, and how they rebuild from that. And so those are interesting, I think, point of views. This isn't, you know, this isn't the Eagles, and then they just had a bad season. The Giants have had multiple years. They tried and they failed. I was just thinking this, obviously things aren't really working out as promised with Bill Belichick in North Carolina. Could there be a hindsight possibility we see Belichick back in the NFL, but under a head coaching staff with the New York Giants? Now, that's something I could probably imagine. And I think it would probably be a temporary solution, but a solution nonetheless. All right, that's all the time I have for you guys. I want to say thank you guys for supporting the channel, our podcast. If you like what you guys are listening to, whether it's on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, wherever you guys get your apps, I want to say thank you. Appreciate your support. Don't forget to check us out. Our audio versions on our YouTube page at the TNC Sports Talk YouTube page, where you can find a whole bunch of AI gaming between baseball, football, wrestling, follow through the course of a franchise season under the current video games available for the year. So that's what you could check out there. Be sure to hit that like, share, and subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And until the next time, you guys all have yourself a wonderful rest of your day. Guys, take care. Have a good one.